shadow work teaches us to engage with our negative, dark, overwhelming emotions that feel like they are consuming us, that feel like they are taking over. Shadow work teaches us how to process these at a very real level. Hello and welcome to Sync and Flow, the podcast with me, your host, Josie Thorne. I am a Red Tent Women's Circle facilitator, a womb healer, and feminine empowerment coach. I have been guiding women to embody their true essence through womb activations and feminine embodiment practices. I started Sync and Flow to help educate and connect women back to the wisdom of their sacred womb space and cyclical nature. I want to help all women reawaken to the true power of the feminine that lives deep within them, so that they may cultivate a relationship to self that is rooted in pure trust, divine love, and a deeply intuitive connection to the body. Thank you for being here and taking the time to listen to this podcast episode. I hope you enjoy. Hello, Sync and Flow family, and welcome back to another episode of Sync and Flow, the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here today for this conversation all about shadow work. Embracing the shadow, discovering the power that comes from our shadow, discovering our dark feminine energy. This is a really exciting conversation. This is an episode I've wanted to film and create and record for you guys for a really long time. I don't know why I've put it off for so long, but who cares? Here we are now today. And yeah, I hope that you are here for the radical honesty and the radical truth, because the sword of truth cuts deep. And not all of us have a strong enough sense of self to be able to acknowledge the truth, to be able to handle the truths of shadow work, because a lot of the time shadow work is uncomfortable truths we have to acknowledge about ourselves and about all of the stories our ego has been telling us, all of the stories that our ego tells us in order to keep us safe. And when I say safe, I mean not physically safe, although at a nervous system level it is that, but safe from taking responsibility. That is more like it. What happens when the ego is keeping us safe and protected from acknowledging the truths? It is not that, the truth will kill us. I mean, maybe on a nervous system level, on a fundamental nervous system level, it really does feel like that. Because on a fundamental nervous system level, the unknown feels like death. And this is why we so often avoid growth, avoid uncomfortable truths, avoid looking in the mirror and accepting these uncomfortable truths about ourselves and about the stories we tell ourselves. And this is a sad, sad reality of the matter, because until you have fully been able to take responsibility and have a deep relationship with your ego, and be able to have enough self-awareness that you are able to catch out your ego when it is up to its little tricks and trying to protect you from looking in all the places that you don't want to look, that the ego doesn't want to acknowledge, that the ego doesn't want to take responsibility for. And so because we avoid taking responsibility for ourselves, for our traumas, for our experiences, we keep ourselves stuck in a victim mentality. And when we keep ourselves stuck in a victim mentality, we refuse to grow. We refuse to expand. We refuse to do the necessary shadow work. We refuse to take accountability and take responsibility for the necessary things that we need to take responsibility for. Because, and I've said this many times, your trauma was not your fault, but your healing is your responsibility. Your healing is your empowerment. Your healing is how you get to up level to your next level of growth. And the only way to get from where you are now to where you want to be is to walk through the uncomfortability of the truths that you are unwilling to accept about yourself. They say that the proportion to which you can grow is also the proportion to which you can face truths about yourself. Face things about yourself that you have been avoiding, that you have been denying, that you have not wanted to face, that you have not wanted to take responsibility for. The more you can take responsibility for those truths, the ones that you have been denying, that you've pushed away and pushed aside and said, not today, not now, not ever. Okay? That is your ego trying to keep you safe. But the more you can bypass the ego, and this is where the power of soul comes in. The soul starts to take charge. The soul says, I know this is hard, but I'm going to do it anyway. I know these truths are uncomfortable, but I'm going to look at them and acknowledge them and look at myself in the mirror, in the eyes, and acknowledge and accept these truths anyway. That is what the soul says. But the ego says, no, I'm not ready. I am not capable. I am in fear. I live in fear of acknowledging these truths about myself. And so we keep ourselves stuck. The ego keeps us stuck in these perpetual cycles of victimhood, of poor me, of why is the world out to get me? And this keeps us stuck. It keeps us stuck in relationships. It keeps us stuck in our personal life, our professional life, in making money, in our business growth, in pleasure expansion, how much we can feel, how much pleasure we can tolerate, and also how much pain we can tolerate. Because the more you can accept and work with the uncomfortable truths, that is proportional to how much pain you can tolerate in your system, because it's not easy to accept uncomfortable truths about oneself. It's not easy. It never is. It's not easy for anyone. Every single person's ego struggles when it comes to this process. Some people just have an ego that holds on stronger than others. And this is why part of the shadow work process is to go through ego deaths. Okay? And through the ego death process, the ego starts to let go of its control. The ego starts to relinquish some of its control. It starts to become a little bit less intense every single time we have an ego death. So today if you're watching on YouTube or on Instagram, I'm wearing blue. And this is in honor of the throat chakra and me speaking my truth and honoring the truth of empowerment, of growth, of healing, of shadow work. So for those of you who do not know, shadow work is the process of exploring the unconscious parts of yourself, those aspects you have repressed, denied, or hidden due to fear, shame, or societal conditioning. Coined by the psychologist Carl Jung, the shadow represents the parts of your psyche that are often seen as undesirable or unfavorable, such as anger, jealousy, fear, or trauma. However, these aspects also hold great power, creativity, and potential for growth. Shadow work is about bringing these hidden parts into the light, integrating them, and finding wholeness. Essentially, we are making the unconscious conscious. We are bringing lightness to the dark tunnel. And in that dark tunnel lives all the parts of you that you have shamed and repressed, because you were told that they are not okay, that they are not healthy, that they are not worthy of love. And that's all what it comes down to. Because yes, the shadow contains toxic and traumatic aspects of yourself, but those parts of you would have healed themselves in your childhood if you had express them in a healthy environment in which you were able to be loved through that experience and loved in the fullness and the totality and the wholeness of who you are and were in that moment, in that experience. Because parts of ourselves only become part of the shadow when we deny them, when we repress them, when we shame them, okay? Because as a young child, I was told, shut up. Why are you getting angry? Don't get angry. Stop crying. Anger is a waste of time. Anger is for bad girls. Only bad girls get angry. Bad, sad, mad girls get angry, and that's not allowed in this family. And unfortunately, that is often the narrative that so many of us were fed growing up, because we did not grow up in a society that taught us how to process and feel and deal with negative and intense emotions. I have an episode on the podcast called How to Feel Difficult Emotions. I highly recommend go listening to that one after this, as it's super insightful. And yeah, these parts of ourselves, they live in the shadow. So why is shadow work important? It helps us to heal emotional wounds. Unprocessed emotions can manifest as anxiety, depression, or physical illness. Shadow work helps us to release that stored pain and that stored emotional experience that we were not able to process in the past. And that is why it's living in the shadow. Shadow work helps us with self-acceptance. It helps us to encourage us to embrace our whole self, not just the acceptable, happy, light, fun, loving parts of us. It also helps us to accept all of us, the angry, the jealous, the fearful, the traumatized, these parts of ourselves that we haven't been taught how to have a relationship with, right? The parts of ourselves that society has deemed unacceptable, that society has deemed dark and scary and shameful and too much, too intense. Shadow work also helps improve relationships, because by understanding our triggers and our patterns, we can then relate to others with so much more compassion and authenticity. Because when you understand your own darkness at a deep level, it allows you to have the same understanding for other people as well, and understand them when they are going through a tough time, and be that support system to help guide them through the darkness. And finally, shadow work also really helps us with personal empowerment, because by reclaiming your shadow, it empowers you to live authentically and tap into hidden strengths. And this is something that I have really experienced in my own life. The more shadow work I've done and the more healing work I've done to reclaim my shadow and to heal my relationship to my anger, to my jealousy, to my rage, to my fears and my traumas, and really brought love to those parts of me, the more I have been able to alchemize my shadow, which means alchemy is a process of turning something that's not valuable into something that is valuable. Alchemy is a word from the medieval times where wizards, or at those times they were more like scientists, they would alchemize lead into gold through a special alchemical process. Okay, this is transmutation. This is transformation. These words are all to do with shadow work. If you know shadow work and you've been reading up in the spiritual healing space about shadow work, you will come across these words very often. Alchemy, transformation, and transmutation. These are the processes of how we transform our shadow into our strength, transform our pain into our power. And there's no one that knows this process more than I have, because I came from a very traumatic childhood. I came from a very traumatic, teenage experience and early 20s. I was severely dysregulated. I was a very angry child. I had a lot of emotional and mental issues that I battled as a teenager and as a young adult. And so over the last 5 years, as I have shared in my journey with you guys on Instagram and in the podcast, I have worked really fucking hard to alchemize my pain, to work with my shadows, and to not repress it any longer. Because the more you repress a problem, the more it persists, okay? The more you resist, the more it persists. The more you repress, the more it comes up as a monster that is going to come out and control you and try to take control at unfavorable moments. And this is the dark side of the shadow, because if we do not have a relationship with our shadow, then any time that we are weak, such as when we are triggered or, going through a really hard time and we don't feel like we are okay inside, this is when the shadow comes out to get us. This is when it comes out to bite. This is when the big green monsters, okay, of jealousy and fear and anger come out to control us. And they rear their ugly heads, and they can really cause a lot of damage. So much damage, because we don't have control over them. They have control over us. And that is fucking dangerous. And this is why we live in the world we live today, because so many people are operating from a personal experience and a personal psyche that has an unintegrated shadow. Okay, so many people are living with an unintegrated shadow. They have no relationship to their shadow. They have no awareness of their shadow, of their darkness, of their triggers. And so the shadow comes out to get them. And what do? They project their shadow onto the other. Okay, because they don't know what to do when the shadow comes up because they have no relationship with it. And so they freak out. And so the only thing that they can do is to repress and push away further the shadow by projecting it onto others. By saying this is your fault, playing the blame game, playing the shame game, and making it everyone else's fault except their own. This is what the unhealthy ego does. It plays the blaming, shaming game of it is your fault I am triggered. It is your fault I feel this way. It is your fault I'm not in my power. It is your fault I'm jealous because you made me jealous. No, this is not the way. No one can make you feel anything. And for a very, very long time, it was so hard for me to accept that. But no one can make you feel or do or say anything against your will. You need to take sovereignty, to take charge, to take back power over your emotions. This is emotional maturity. This is emotional power. This is emotional control. And this is not the same as emotional suppression. No, it is important that we feel and process our emotions, but we must never ever give another person power over our emotions. Our emotions are our responsibility. Our emotions are our responsibility to take control over. If you feel something, that is not someone else's responsibility to heal and fix. It is your responsibility, my love. Only you can take control of your emotions. Only you can take control of your shadow. Okay? You have that power. You have that power. But unfortunately, we live in a world where we have not been empowered to have a healthy relationship with our emotions, with our dark, negative, low vibrational emotions. And when I say dark, negative, low vibrational, I do not mean that there is a hierarchy of emotions. And this is another myth that we need to bust. I am a shadow worker myth buster. And I'm here to tell you that we need to bust this myth, because there is no emotion is better or worse than another. It is just on a scale of feeling, okay? Yes, anger is a more lower vibrational energy than bliss. But it feels heavier in the body. That's why we say lower vibrational. It's more dense. It's heavier in the body. It's heavier weight as an energy. Feeling our bliss is just as important as feeling our anger. And feeling our anger is just as important as feeling our bliss. And this is the mistake that has been perpetuated in our society. It is so fucking important that we learn healthy ways to process our negative emotions. It is so important. And this is part of shadow work. Shadow work teaches us to engage with our negative, dark, overwhelming emotions that feel like they are consuming us, that feel like they are taking over. Shadow work teaches us how to process these at a very real level. So how do we do this? Okay. First, we start by acknowledging that the shadow exists. Begin by recognizing that everyone has a shadow, and accept that these hidden aspects are natural and necessary for growth. There's no need to feel shame or guilt. This is part of the human experience. Remember that shame blocks you from growing. Guilt blocks you from expanding. A brain in shame cannot learn. A brain in shame cannot heal. And so we have to realize that shame is not an organic human emotion. I'm sure I've said this many times on the podcast before. Shame is not an organic human emotion. Shame has to be placed on you from the outside. Shame is an inversion. It is an illusion. Okay? Shame is placed on you from someone else on the outside, suppressing you, pushing you down, telling you that you are not acceptable or okay or lovable as you are in that moment. And so what do? We don't just suddenly stop feeling. The brain, what it does is it starts to be like, oh my God, someone just told me that the way that I feel is not lovable. So what must I do to become lovable? I must push away this emotion. But what happens is the body is still experiencing it. And so what happens is the body pushes it down to store it for later. And so these trapped emotions get blocked and trapped and stored in our nervous system. But there's no such thing as later. The body knows no sense of time. It only knows the present. And so this is why when we get triggered, those trapped emotions then come to the surface. And this is why shadow work is so powerful and the body is so intelligent. The reason those triggers come to the surface and those suppressed emotions from the past come to the surface in the present is because your body is trying to let go of them, is because your body is trying to heal, is because your nervous system is trying to let it go. Because the only way you can let it go and release the suppressed, stored, trapped, blocked emotions from the past and do the necessary shadow work and therefore alchemize that to a positive power in the future is through feeling, my love. There is no other way around it. There is no other way. You have to feel it in order to heal it. Okay? It really is that simple. You have to feel it in order to heal it. So step 2 of the shadow work process is self-reflection. Reflecting on your patterns. Ask yourself, what triggers me the most in others? Because that is going to be a signal and an indicator as to what shadows are working within you. Because remember, a trigger is a teacher. A trigger is always showing you and guiding you back to the self. Even though the trigger may seem like it's about the other person, that is only an illusion. The trigger is guiding us back to ourselves. The trigger is a teacher of transformation. And the trigger is an opportunity for you to get really, really clear on what are your blocks and what are your shadows. Okay? What do you still need to work on at a deeper level? Because the triggers show you where you are not free. The triggers show you where you are still not free yet. And that is their medicine and that is their power. Ask yourself, what do I fear others might discover about me? What are you scared of others knowing about you, right? Like for me, it used to be that I am a really aggressive person. Not anymore. But it used to be that, I used to be so scared of other people finding out that I'm actually like quite intense and can be a little bit aggressive and crazy sometimes. And what emotions do I avoid or suppress? Okay? Every time an emotion comes up and you refuse to feel it, that is your ego's way of protecting you, and that is where you can find a clue as to what emotions are you avoiding, what emotions are you suppressing. And the more you can work with these questions of what triggers me, what do I fear others are going to find out about me, and what emotions do I avoid or suppress? Ask yourself these questions, and those are the keys to unlock the doors of your shadow. We can also do some shadow work journaling, and journaling can be a really powerful tool for uncovering your shadow. Questions like, what am I afraid to admit about myself? When have I felt envious, resentful, or jealous, and why? What parts of myself do I feel ashamed of, and how do they show up in my life? These questions, again, are the keys to unlocking the doors of your shadow. And they are going to help you dive deeper into your psyche. Okay, working with our shadow is a continuous process. Once we start to unlock the doors of our shadow, we have to start to take the steps to walk into those rooms, walk into those dark tunnels with a shining light of love coming from our heart to guide our way. Okay? That light of love shining from our heart, shining from our compassion and our self-love. Step 4, work with your triggers. Pay attention to your emotional reactions. When you feel triggered, instead of reacting, pause and explore. What belief or wound is being activated? And what does this trigger teach me about myself? Remember, I said triggers are guiding us back home to the self. Triggers show us where we are not yet free. And they show us a beautiful, well-lit road. Triggers are such a powerful thing. They truly are beautiful, beautiful teachers, and it takes a shit ton of shadow work to get to this point where I am today, to be able to be grateful for our triggers. Because for a very long time I was like, fuck you triggers, I hate you, how dare you come up again and again and again. I thought I healed you, I thought I dealt with you, why are you still here? And the trigger whispers gently to me, I am still here because there is more healing to do. I am still here because you are still not yet free of this wound and belief system. And so the trigger shows us, okay, what wound, what belief system is blocking us and keeping us small. And you don't always need to know where that belief system or trauma comes from. You don't need to pinpoint it back to your childhood or back to a memory. You just need to know what it feels like. You just need to know, okay, what does the trigger feel like in my body? Start by asking yourself that. And then ask yourself, what is this trigger trying to teach me? Is it that I am afraid of being abandoned? Is it that I need to learn to ask for help? Is it that I am afraid of being alone? Is it that I am scared that there's not going to be enough food for me? You know, whatever the trigger is, all of our triggers are uniquely intelligent to us and our personal circumstances. And in this way, our triggers are they are genius. Our triggers have their own intelligence. And so instead of working against the intelligence of our triggers, how about we work with the intelligence of our triggers? Because our triggers are not going anywhere. They are not going away. And the more you try to push your triggers away, the more they're just going to come back up and keep on hurting you and keep on affecting you, and you will curse your triggers. But Like I said, we need to be able to learn to create a new relationship with our triggers where we can start to be grateful for their presence in our lives. Okay? Step 5, practice inner child work. Much of the shadow forms in childhood. Connect with your inner child by visualizing them and offering compassion. Ask your inner child and put your hands on your heart. Hold yourself. Give yourself a big hug. What do I need to feel safe and loved right now? What do I need to feel safe and loved right now? What messages did I internalize as a child that are no longer serving me? When I was shamed for being angry as a child, what message did I internalize? Because remember, the child's brain is not fully formed yet. It doesn't have the emotional maturity to be able to understand things like an adult brain does. And so when we get told you are a bad girl, the child's brain internalizes that as I am a bad person. I am bad for being angry. And so we start to connect belief systems and emotions. And then every single time that emotion comes up in the future, the belief system comes with it. The belief system of, okay, every time I feel anger, now I feel bad and like a guilty child for feeling anger. But anger is a very natural and human emotion. But only because of the way we receive that conditioning as children do you feel that way. Okay, so doing inner child work and doing shadow work are deeply linked. They are almost pretty much the same thing. Okay, because the shadow forms in childhood, and a lot of the messages and belief systems and structures of our shadow self comes from a child who didn't feel loved, the childhood version of us that didn't feel loved, that didn't feel safe, that didn't feel validated, that didn't feel acknowledged, that didn't feel heard, seen, or understood. And so in order to cope with not feeling seen, heard, understood, loved, all of these experiences, it suppressed that experience. It suppressed that emotion. It told itself it's not good enough. Okay? And so what do we do with those feelings of not being good enough? We push them away. We force them away. We suppress. Step 6, engage in embodiment practices. The body is where all of these repressed emotions are stored. And so we need to use embodiment practices such as breath work to release tension and access deeper emotions. Intuitive movement or dance to express unprocessed feelings, and meditation to sit with uncomfortable emotions and observe them without judgment. Okay, all of these practices help us come back to a state of regulation in the body. Remember, I spoke about the nervous system holding on to these repressed emotions. And so what we need to do is to regulate the nervous system so that we can then have the courage and the power and the self-love to be able to acknowledge these difficult feelings, these difficult emotions without judgment, from a space of love and compassion and acknowledgement. Okay. Step 7, seek guidance and support. I highly recommend considering working with a therapist, coach, or healer that is skilled in shadow work, such as myself. We can help you to navigate difficult emotions safely and provide valuable insights. Community support can also offer validation and connection. all the work that I do with my clients is fundamentally shadow work. Womb work is fundamentally shadow work in the beginning stages, that is, because so much of the womb work that I do with my clients is around acknowledging the repression of the feminine and the internalized misogyny that we have taken on within our own bodies because of the feminine negative culture that we have grown up in. The womb negative, the period negative, emotional negative culture that we have grown up in. And this is really, really sad because so much of what we are seeing right now on the world stage is because so many people are living with an unintegrated shadow. They are living at war with their own shadow, but they do not even know that they are because their ego is keeping them sheltered and safe and protected from even acknowledging the shadow, from even confronting the shadow. And so only when we get triggered do we realize that there is still more shadow living underneath. And so this is why it's so important that we do regular shadow work, not just when we get triggered, not just when we're going through a hard time, not just when life is difficult, right? That's obviously easiest because, we get to see where's the shadow, where are the blocks, where are the repressed emotions. But we do shadow work as a consistent self-care practice by going to therapy regularly, by journaling about our blocks and our struggles and the repressed emotions regularly, by, really confronting within ourselves, like, what do I struggle with? What are my insecurities? What are my judgments that I project onto other people? And how can I use them as ways to deeper understand myself? Because all the judgments that we make about others are really just a judgment that we are making about ourselves, okay? Every time you judge another, it is really just an invitation for you to look at yourself on a deeper level, to see, where am I not yet free? How is my shadow still controlling me? How is my shadow controlling the way I perceive life, perceive other people? Are other people really out to get me and are, judging me and criticizing me all the time? Or is my own inner critic judging and criticizing me on a really hectic level that now I externalize that judgment and criticism? Because that really is what happens. The more we believe something on the inside, the more it starts to reflect on the outside. And this is how manifestation works. You believe something and you repeat it to yourself enough times on the inside that it starts to become true and reflect itself on the outside. You guys know that this is the truth. Step 8. Practice self-compassion. Shadow work can be intense. Very, very intense. I'm not going to lie to you about that. So approach yourself with patience and kindness and celebrate the courage it takes to face your shadows and acknowledge your progress, no matter how small. This is really, really important, especially for those of you who, like me, are self-development junkies and who are always wanting to grow and become a better version of yourself, and who have a little bit of perfectionism when it comes to the self-healing journey. This is definitely, part of my story, trying to release perfectionism around growth and self-development and realizing that we can't be growing and developing all the fucking time. Like sometimes we need to just sit and chill and acknowledge how far we have come and not always look at the next mountain that we have to climb, but actually, sit still and turn around and look at all the mountains we have climbed thus far. It's really important for us to do that and really acknowledge your progress. Acknowledge, and this is when you are healing. When you have a situation that in the past would have triggered you to a level, 80 to 100, and now it is only triggering you to a level 40 or 50. That is massive, massive progress, right? When you are able to start to communicate in a healthy way, in a moment of trigger, in a moment of uncomfortable emotion coming up, in a moment of feeling overwhelmed and intense and sad and angry and all these emotions, right? And you being able to communicate in a healthy, grounded, regulated way, that shows so much progress. So much progress. And we have to be able to pat ourselves on the back and acknowledge that progress, because it happens in micro little bits, okay? Healing is very rarely this massive experience and now suddenly I'm healed and it's all gone and blah, blah, blah. No. Healing happens in the micro moments. Healing happens through titration. Titration is a beautiful word to describe one small bit at a time. And this is the best way to approach your healing and shadow work journey, is just take it at a bite-sized chunk at a time, one small step at a time. It's the easiest way, and it's the only way actually, because otherwise it becomes too overwhelming when we're like, oh my God, I have all these triggers and all these shadows and I have so much that I have to heal and I am so broken and I'm so overwhelmed by how broken I am. No, that is overwhelming. Of course, you're going to feel like it's too much if you view it from that perspective. And so that's why it's so much easier if we just view it from this perspective of one step at a time, one block at a time, one emotion at a time, one trigger at a time. Okay? And in that way, it allows us to do shadow work in a really self-responsible and self-sufficient way that doesn't allow us to get too overwhelmed or too, lost in the chaos and lost in the emotion, because that's also something that can really happen, is we get overwhelmed and we get lost in the emotional experience of the trigger. We get lost in, what does this trigger mean? What does it say about me? What does it say about him? What does it say about them? What does it say about this experience? And we make our emotions mean something. There is a very big difference from feeling your emotions and processing your emotions and letting them out, to analyzing your emotions and thinking about your emotions and making your emotions mean something. As soon as you are making your emotions mean something about yourself, then you've gone too far, babe. You've gone way too far, right? If every time I felt angry and I said to myself, Josie, why are you so angry? Why are you like this? Why are you broken? You shouldn't be angry. No, that's a waste of time. Anger is a beautiful emotion. It is a powerful emotion. I will make another podcast on the power of sacred rage. Okay? Because every shadow has a light side to it. Yes, the shadow is anger and rage, but what is the light aspect to it? Passion, babe. Passion. If it wasn't for my anger, if it wasn't for me being able to access and feel my anger, I would never be able to access and feel my passion. which provides a fuel, which provides motivation, okay? So can you see, it's not about dismissing the shadow and getting rid of the shadow. It's about integrating the shadow so that we can make the shadow work for us instead of against us, okay? We need our shadow. It is important. The concept of yin and yang is a beautiful, powerful concept that teaches us, in the darkest places, there is still light. And in the lightest places, there is still the capacity for darkness. We cannot have lightness without the darkness. We cannot have good without the bad. We need them. This is how we as humans make sense of our world through binary opposites. It is how we create meaning of our world. Without knowing our anger, how could we ever know our passion? Without knowing our sadness, how could we ever know our bliss? Without being outside in the sunshine, how could we ever know the darkness of nighttime? So our shadow helps us to live in contrast because we only understand life in contrast. Through the contrast is how we make meaning. It's how we understand things at a deeper level. Shadow work is so fucking powerful. And the shadow work journey never ends. I have been doing consistent shadow work for about 6 or 7 years now, and I'm still on the journey. But it does get easier because there's so much of the shadow work journey in the beginning is inner child healing. You have to let go of all of the bullshit and emotions and unmet needs and stored anger at your parents that you are holding inside your body so that you can stop projecting it onto your partner, onto your friends, and making everyone in your life wrong. They're not wrong, babe. It's just your perception of their actions that is creating the emotional reaction. And so then once you can heal of that stuff from your past, that's when you can go to people and speak to them in a very calm, neutral way and say, hey, I didn't like that. That wasn't cool. That wasn't okay. That really hurt me. But we're not, you see what I'm doing? We're speaking about it in a neutral, self-responsible way. We're not blaming and we're not shaming. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it inspires you to go on your own shadow work healing journey. If you would like support on your shadow work healing journey, please feel free to reach out to me. Like I said, womb work is shadow work. This episode is just an overarching, generalized episode on what is shadow work and how to do shadow work. I will in a future episode, get into how womb work is shadow work. And I also want to start talking more about dark feminine energy because dark feminine energy is very much related to our shadow, and dark feminine energy is the reclamation of our shadow. The dark feminine says, my anger is a tool. My sadness is a catalyst. My grief is a portal to more power. So that's definitely something I'm going to get into at a later episode. If you've listened to the end, thank you so much for being here. Your support means so much more than you know to me. I self-fund this podcast entirely out of my own pocket, and I keep it ad and sponsorship free for all of you so that you don't have to listen to annoying adverts. So please, please, please support me. Go give this podcast a rating and review if you are watching on Apple. If you are listening on Apple or Spotify, please give it a review, 5-star review, and send me a screenshot of your review, and I will happily send you my womb healing ebook guide for free as a thank you. And If you are watching on YouTube, don't forget to please like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. I just hit 400 subscribers on YouTube. I'm really excited to be building my YouTube community and creating more free content for you guys there on YouTube, especially long form content. And if you're watching on Instagram, thank you so much for being here and being a part of this community. And I will see you guys in the next episode. I have 3 spots right now available for some one-to-one coaching. So if that is you and you would like to go on a journey in connection to your shadow, your feminine energy, your womb, and to reclaim your empowerment, reclaim your body, reclaim your womb, your menstrual cycle, your emotional relationship to yourself, then please feel free to reach out. I'm sending you all my love, darling. Mwah. Chat soon. Ciao, babe. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode and engage with all the wisdom that was shared. If you enjoyed this podcast, please remember to leave a review on your podcast platform of choice, as this really helps this wisdom reach new people. If you have any questions or queries, please feel free to reach out to me via Instagram DM or send me an email. You can follow me on my personal account on Instagram at Josie, Josie _Thorne, THORNE, or you can follow Sync and Flow, my business accounts, at Sync, that's spelled SYNC _in_flow. Please feel free to reach out with any questions or queries you may have. Otherwise, get in contact to book a free discovery call to start your self-healing spiritual journey today. I look forward to hearing from you, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now, loves.